Hey everyone, and welcome back to Just Finish Coding. I'm Sriram, and this video is part 2 of the Hangman game dev series where we recreate the famous game on Scratch. If you haven't watched part 1, then click on the card up here. And just a reminder, if you are stuck during any part of video, then you can head over to the downloadable files link in the description box below, download just the file that you need, and then continue. In this video, we will set up the circles as well as the backspace button in order to create a perfect keyboard. This will include some nice effects when the user hovers his mouse over the keys. Also, I'll share a simple trick to make your thumbnail show when the stop button is pressed. Anyway, without further ado, let's get right into the code. For the circle sprite, we will be reusing some of the blocks that we created for the keyboard letters. So, throw in the get values at index and go to tile x tile y custom blocks over to the circles sprite. Clean up and then add the following new custom blocks. The first is get index at tile x with an input of tile x and tile y with an input of tile y. Make sure you run without screen refresh. The purpose of this function is to get the index of a tile given its tile x and tile y values. We need to store this information somewhere, so create a new variable called index for this sprite only. Set index to be tile x plus 1 plus tile y multiplied by number of columns. And yeah, that's pretty much it. This may be a bit hard to grasp, but it is quite simple. Since the tile x grid starts from 0 and the index begins from 1, we add 1 to the tile x value. For each increment in tile y, we move an entire row of indices. Each row contains grid columns number of indices, so while changing tile y, we must change index by number of columns. Perfect, the next function will be called get values at x with an input of xpos and y with an input of ypos. Make sure to run without screen refresh. This function will kind of be the reverse of go to tile x tile y. The purpose of this function is to get tile x, tile y, index and the letter info given the x and y positions of the circle. Alright, set tile x to be the floor of xpos minus begin x divided by the tile width. Duplicate this and just change tile x to tile y, xpos to ypos, and begin x to begin y. We have to be a little bit careful though. Since tile y increments downwards, which is the opposite of what Scratch's coordinates do, we must reverse the sign, thus subtracting ypos from begin y. We've already done this work for the index, so duplicate it. We don't need the inputs here. Rather, just use the variables that we just set up. Finally, set letter to be item index of letters. This should be self-explanatory. Wonderful, the backbone functions are all set up and now we can set the clones to align with the letters. On receiving init circles, go to the front layer and then set the size to be tile width divided by 32 minus 0.2 multiplied by 100%. This is very similar to the size trick that we used for the keyboard letters. The width of each costume is 32 and we are decreasing the final magnification by 20% to ensure that the circles aren't hitting each other. Great, now create a custom block called create clones, making sure to run without screen refresh. Place the block after the init circles message. Okay, now we must define it. First show and then set the ghost effect to be 80%. Create a variable called clone for the sprite only and then another variable called clone ID for the sprite only. Set the clone variable initially to be yes. Next, set clone ID to be 1 and then repeat 26 times. Each time, get values at index, clone ID, then go to that particular tile x and tile y coordinates. Create a clone and finally change clone ID by 1. After this, the clones will have been created, so set clone to be no. Just like the keyboard letters, the clone variable here distinguishes the clones from the sprite by itself. We're still not quite done, as at this point the sprite is still visible. So make sure it is hidden and then set the ghost effect back to 0. After this, we can move to the main message, that is the when I receive start message. Here, repeat until game over becomes yes. At this point it's identical to a forever loop, but the difference will come in later. We'll just program the case of game mode being accept and leave the rest for a future video. If this is the case, check if the mouse is touching it, and if yes, set the brightness to be 100%. If not, then set the brightness to be 0%. Pretty simple, but this really improves the UI. Test the program and nice, the circles add so much detail and the screen looks way better than just with the letters. That's pretty cool, and now let's add a backspace button at around this point. Notice that its tile X value is 6, while its tile Y value is 2. This will come into play later on. Getting back to the code. Take the go to tile X, tile Y block and throw it into the backspace sprite. This is the only custom block that we will reuse, and the rest of the code will be done there itself. On receiving, init circles, hide, and then go to tile X 6 and tile Y 2. That's it for init. Let's now get to the start message. Here, within a forever loop, check if game mode is accept. The user enters the word only during this mode, and only here does a backspace key even make sense. So in the else condition, just hide. In the former case, show, and after this check if the mouse pointer is being touched. If yes, then set the ghost effect to be 20%, and otherwise set the ghost effect to be 0. Super simple. Test the program out and the backspace button should be perfectly positioned. But there seems to be a small lag and I don't quite like this. Not a problem, and we can fix this very easily. In the init message, go to the tile coordinates first and rather than hide, show. Test the program again and now everything seems perfect. We could just end here, but I want to ensure that the thumbnail is set up before we finish. Head over to the thumbnail sprite and start when the green flag is clicked. Here, set the ghost effect to be 100% and then show. Make sure the sprite is in the front layer. On receiving start, put in a forever loop and each time just go to the front layer. That is it. The working is pretty straightforward. When the stop button is pressed, Scratch pretty much resets all the sprite's effects such as brightness, fisheye and ghost. Resetting the ghost effect just means that the sprite, if shown and completely transparent, will become opaque and visible. If the sprite is always in the front layer and is transparent, then it will effectively show itself when the stop button is pressed. This is exactly what we intended to achieve. Test the program and then hit the stop button after a short while. Bam! The beautiful thumbnail shows itself and we have it completely ready. If you've enjoyed this video, then please make sure you leave a like, and also don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in part 3.